Welcome back to episode 5 of Beyond the Party Lines. I am Luke Shahid, and I'm with my co-host,
Ethan Shea.
And today we're going to be talking about a few different topics. Starting off, when we last talked to you guys, we were still in the midst of a government shutdown, which ended like an hour after we ended the episode, which was funny how that timing happened. But going to be discussing that a little bit today and some just general current events that are happening around the nation. And so our first topic is going to be about the future of U.S. healthcare and the Affordable Care Act and the subsidies and the 2025 funding and that standoff and how that is progressing. So some context for those of you who do not know. Congress returned for its final 2025 session. One of the biggest unresolved issues is whether to extend the enhanced subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, the ACA. These subsidies lower health insurance premiums for millions of Americans, but they were originally created temporarily during the pandemic.
The debate comes right after the lengthy 2025 federal government shutdown, which was the longest one in history, and the deal to end the shutdown mostly kicked the healthcare can down the road to December.
So kind of just what's going on, what the ACA subsidies are. They are financial assistance provided by the federal government to help people afford health insurance purchase through the ACA marketplace. And they reduce monthly premiums, particularly for low-income and middle-class families. And why this is happening right now, Congress expanded these subsidies during the COVID-19 pandemic to help people during the economic disruption. Those expansions expire at the end of 2025 unless Congress acts. So we have millions of Americans watching closely if subsidies will expire. Premiums could rise hundreds of dollars per month for some families. Republicans and Democrats have fundamentally different views about healthcare's role in the government. And after the shutdown, lawmakers delayed this fight during the shutdown negotiations, so now it's on a ticking clock. Ethan, do you want to give some of the different arguments?
Yeah. So, first of all, this isn't just a policy. It affects real families and the country's budget. The Democratic argument for the extension of these subsidies is basically to keep healthcare insurance affordable for basically millions of Americans who couldn't otherwise pay the rising premiums. The Democrats think that healthcare is a right and that the government should ensure access, especially in an economy with rising costs, such as right now. And without subsidies, people may drop coverages, and this makes raising hospital uncompensated care costs and destabilizing insurance markets. And also, these subsidies have been more successful than before because now more Americans are insured now than before the pandemic. And they argue that this isn't dependency, it's ensuring families can afford medical care without going bankrupt. And just to go on a tangent a little bit, people in America, it's proven that people in America cannot afford the current health, a lot of Americans cannot afford rising healthcare costs. For example, Luigi Mangione, who allegedly shot the United Healthcare CEO a couple years ago. He did so because his life was ruined because he couldn't pay for his healthcare costs after a freak accident. Right. And that's what insurance is supposed to do. You're supposed to buy insurance, so one day when the accident comes, you are able to be fully paid back in full. You can move on with your life. And instead, he was forced with to face debt and being kicked out of his apartment, and it just eventually drove him to take out the man he thought was responsible. And also, one more thing I want to point out is that majority of the ACA subsidies, the people who use those are on those plans, those are people in red states. I believe we covered this in the shutdown episode where the top 5 states were Texas, Florida, California, North Carolina, and I believe Georgia. So 2 battlegrounds, 2 reds, 1 blue. Go figure.
Right. And so Ethan's giving one side. I'm going to try to give the other side because this is Beyond the Party Lines. Yeah. And So the more Republican conservative view is that the subsidies were created as a temporary emergency measure and not a permanent expansion of the government. According to physical analysis, making them permanent increases long-term federal spending significantly. Republicans also argue that the constant subsidies hide the real issue that healthcare costs are too high. They believe that the long-term solution is more competition, price transparency, and market reforms, not expanding government aid. This is very typical for Republicans to argue for a smaller government. Many conservatives worry that expanding subsidies make people increasingly dependent on government programs. As Ethan was arguing the flip side, Democrats are not arguing this is a dependency, but this is more of a natural right and something that people deserve to have healthcare if they cannot afford it. Some Republicans might allow a smaller extension, but only with spending cuts or structural reforms elsewhere. So, as we've seen time and time again, the Republicans are very, they don't want to expand the government too much, and the Democrats are trying to have a stronger centralized government, all going back to federalism and what role does the government have in society. And I think kind of just segueing into like our thoughts personally, like, does the government have the right to be giving healthcare as a right to the people? Is that a right that people inherently deserve, and does the government like need to be doing this? Or do you want to answer that? Yeah.
So I think that healthcare should be a guaranteed public utility, whereas healthcare insurance is not. So it's I look elsewhere and I see like better examples of healthcare all around the world where healthcare just in general is government funded completely. So you can go when you're sick and you can get good level of care. Now, of course, there's going to be people who are like, oh, I want to pay for private healthcare. That's better. And the way the system is set up right now is that's what it is. But what we've done now is we essentially have a government that where political power cannot check the power of capital. So, and I'll elaborate on that, is basically the reason that we need healthcare insurance is because these healthcare companies are charging beyond, like, way out of control. 300, over 1,000% more than what it costs them. For example, I think it was Mark Cuban who has a company called costplusdrugs.com, where he breaks down transparently, like, what it costs to make drugs. Like not drugs, but like what it costs to make medical medicine, and how much hospitals will charge you. Because I think I've been to a hospital once before, and I got a Band-Aid as part of my treatment, and the Band-Aid cost $50. And I was like, right. So that's insane. Like, and these companies like cannot be controlled. Either cannot, or the government cannot or won't control them. And I'll use an example of a different country. So stick with me here. China, for example, while they may label themselves a communist country in terms of politically, it is a thriving market economy where, even though it's one political party in China that's in control, that's been in control for years, the changes that it's been making, the progress it's been making in the last century has been broader and greater than any other country in the entire world. Where I'm not gonna shit on the two-party system, but in China there's a system where political power can always control capital for the good of the people, and that's what we lack in America. Which is why I believe that Republicans, like, maybe you can downsize the subsidies, but something has to give. You have to control these companies before you can let these subsidies go. Number one protection is healthcare, and essentially, let me just summarize my whole argument: is that healthcare should be a right, and we should control the companies and have them charge what it actually costs. It shouldn't be this huge money making scheme where now Americans are forced to rely on millions and millions. And now, essentially what's happening is that private companies are taking money from the government through these insurance subsidies. I don't think that's right. I disagree. I don't think that companies should have the power to basically charge the government for the protection of their people, the healthcare of the people. If the government companies cannot be controlled, that's where the subsidies are necessary, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's a very the argument definitely makes sense to me. I do feel like people naturally deserve healthcare. I mean, if someone's hurt, then they have the right to get any healthcare that they need despite their economic situation. However, practically, I don't know how it works. I do think that the public versus private is a good, not compromise, but that's a good way of getting around it. Like, you have public schools, and then if a parent doesn't want to pay for public schools or doesn't want their child going to public schools, then they have to pay more money for a private school, and you can weigh whether or not that's worth it, as someone who goes to private school and someone who goes to public school.
Right.
But
at the same time, the people who cannot afford to go, at the same time, the people who can't afford to go to private school. So, like, I don't know. Because the entire...
It's not a 100% comparison, yeah.
Right. But the entire system of America, like, now we can extend this healthcare argument into education where, if we just raise the bottom standard of education in public schools, there wouldn't be a need for private schools in the first place. So I don't really know like if I'm arguing against the entire like, because I do support the capitalist system in theory, where if you work harder you make more, but at the same time working hard isn't the only part of the equation. It's the opportunity, and opportunity is sometimes based on luck. And because of that, you need those who have the opportunity, who do work hard, to offset the bad luck that others face, for a country to run equally and equitably. So I don't quite know if we should reform the entire system where everything's public or everything's private, but the current model isn't working.
Yeah, and then and I think kind of going back to that education parallel, that's not fully parallel, but also how are the doctors and nurses who work for this public healthcare system, how are they going to be getting paid? Are they going to be getting paid enough? Because we have a bunch of teachers who aren't getting paid enough who work at public schools, and one of the most important jobs is teaching our children, and they're not getting paid enough. Nurses are already not getting paid enough in our own system.
Nobody's paid by the government. Nobody at for lack of a better term, nobody who works a blue collar job in the government is getting paid enough. Whether or not it's construction, whether it's teaching, whether it's being a nurse, none of them are getting paid enough. So it's a tough situation, especially because hospitals themselves are owned by private companies. While for example, I think and then these companies say they're not for profit, they're non-profit. I don't believe that, because what we felt as high school students is, for example, the College Board is a non-profit.
Right.
Do you feel that the College Board needs to charge $100 per AP exam and $65 per SAT?
It does not seem like it.
As a non-profit to expand, even though they got rid of SAT subject tests a couple years ago, and now they're introducing more APs, trying to make it easier, where it's the system where the incentive is to make money is kind of eroding what the focus on the important things are. Because, for example, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, AP exams were regarded as the top level of education in a public school, where AP calculus, AP chemistry, were extremely hard subjects, and now we have not to dog these people, but how do you grade AP 3D art or visual arts objectively? How do you? And then they've introduced pre-calc, which is known as an extremely easy AP. We can say the same. I guess tie the same thing to macroeconomics and psychology, where it's getting watered down. So I think just in general, the whole system is the entire focus is to make money, and every company in America is losing focus on what's important.
Yeah, I mean, I do think my gut instinct, like many people, is that humans deserve healthcare, and I think a lot of people do agree on that. I think not that that's a bipartisan fact, but I think the Republican-Democrat issue is the practicality and logistics of things. And I don't have an answer. Ethan doesn't have an. We don't have two high school students don't have an answer to these current event problems. We're just trying to give the possible arguments and our 2 cents, really. Yeah. But we're not going to come to a conclusion today. I don't think America will in the next few weeks, but I do think it's a very important discussion to be had. And yeah, kind of just what is the federal government's right, and also, as Republicans were arguing, if you give healthcare now, is this like when it was meant to be a temporary thing and now you're using it for long term, is that even right, or is that breaking the commitment that it had a few years ago?
Yes, but in context, no, because these companies took advantage of these subsidies, and now even if the government gets rid of these subsidies, companies won't go back to pre-COVID numbers. Mm-hmm. They're still going to be elevated. So, what you're really doing, while it did get people through COVID, and while wages have risen after, unemployment has lowered, decreased since COVID has ended, you still have these companies charging more than pre-COVID, way more than even matching by inflation. So I don't think that these subsidies are completely. It's not a crazy statement to extend these subsidies if you don't rein in the power these companies have. And just for another example of the public versus private, Luke goes to a private school.
I do.
$60,000 a year for full tuition. I go to a public school. My school ran out of paper last year. May, I believe we ran out of paper. It just really draws the line between public and private education in America. Right. I think.
Right. And like I said, if we do make everything public, then will hospitals start losing paper if people aren't paying for it,
that's not really my point, but
I know, but it is the logistics and making sure we're trying to accommodate the common good, we're trying to accommodate everyone, and we're also trying to accommodate the people who are working in these systems, making sure the teachers aren't underpaid in the public, and making sure that nurses especially and doctors aren't underpaid when it comes to these very important high-level jobs. Yeah.
Well, when it comes to healthcare, I think the private argument is that, even if we did give the government the power and the money to publicize the entire system, that they would do a shit job essentially, and that it's more worth it for them to put their private money in and, get a better result for them. And in doing that, they leave the rest of the country behind in terms of public healthcare. So what you really got to do is you got to put, I'm a proponent for a bigger government in this case, because you really just need to reform the healthcare system where, it's the public is so good you don't even need the private. That's that's really the solution. Fix the public healthcare and education to be so good where going private just isn't worth it anymore. And the more you do, and the first step is always the hardest. The more you do it, the more progress you make. More people who paid private are not going to pay more in taxes to go help the public, and then it catches momentum. And eventually, in a utopian society, we would have free healthcare. We would have free, effective, good healthcare.
Yeah. I think we kind of hit on all the main arguments there, all the big topics there.
So, our second topic today is redistricting in America, Texas's new map and the fight over representation. So, the Supreme Court recently approved Texas's newly redrawn congressional map that happened outside of the census every decade. The map, drawn by Texas Republicans, adds several GOP-leaning districts and was challenged by civil rights groups who say it dilutes minority voting power. And this ruling could basically shape control of the House in 2026, because as we talked about last episode, the healthcare that Republicans kind of won on in this last election is going to push a lot of people, especially in red states, to vote. Potentially change their vote in the upcoming midterms. So I believe they added 5. This predicted to add 5 new red seats in the House, and I think that this could change the shape of the House in 2026. Because these people, they do think that the voters in Texas are going to increase. The Democratic voters in Texas are going to increase because of recent events. So, what is redistricting? Every 10 years after the census, states redraw congressional districts to reflect population changes. The party in power in the state often controls this process, and when a map is drawn to favor one group, it is called gerrymandering. They can gerrymander by political parties or by racial demographics. In Texas, Republicans control the state legislature, so they drew the map. Civil rights groups sued, claiming the map underrepresents Black and Latino voters. However, the Supreme Court, which is, I believe, 6 Republicans and 3 Democrats, approved the map, which means it will be used in the upcoming midterm elections. So,
can I just say one quick thing? Yeah. It's a very interesting thing because every state always redraws after the census every 10 years. Yes. And that's the tradition, that's the history, but that's not a written law. So if it sounds like, well, Texas is just breaking the law, why can't people do anything about it? That's just more of an understanding, like, why would you redraw districts if your census hasn't been taken and it's right before the 2026 House midterm elections? So Texas isn't doing anything illegal, which is what the Supreme Court found, but it's completely out of the ordinary, and they're breaking the past tradition that's been happening.
And this breaking in precedent comes at a really interesting time because it's forecasted that Republicans might lose the midterm elections because of, how Trump's first term is going, and because, the entire perception of the Republican Party is Trump. The actions he takes, affect the entire party, and I think that he's afraid that people will really vote against him in the next midterm, and if he loses control of Congress, I think a lot of his new policies are going to be really, really hard to control. He'll still have the courts though, which is not the best. Actually, it's not. Let's not say that. He will still
the party lines there.
He will still have control of the courts, which will help the Republican cause. But depending on how the census goes, he may find himself overruled by the 2/3 Senate vote, 2/3 Congress vote, if he decides to veto Democratic laws or Democratic leaning laws. Sorry. So, according to civil rights groups, in this situation, Texas grew by mostly in Black and Latino populations. Yet this new map does not increase minority representative districts. They argue that this is a racial gerrymander that weakens minority voting power by splitting communities across districts, and this undermines the Voting Rights Act. They think that redistricting commissions should be independent and they should remove politicians from this process.
And then we have the flip side of the conservative Republican arguments, and they are arguing that the map reflects legal population changes and maintains geographic continuity. And according to Texas legislature and the court, there was insufficient evidence of intentional racial discrimination. Republicans stress that Democrats gerrymander in blue states too, including Maryland, Illinois, New York, etc. And they argue this is a political fight, not a racial one. And every party tries to maximize seats. From a conservative point of view, the judicial approval means the map is constitutional and accusations of racial intent are exaggerated. So this is what the conservatives are saying and the Republicans. So then kind of just what can we think about here? Can any state be trusted to draw its own maps fairly? This kind of goes with it, but should there be a bipartisan group that oversees these things? I think that makes sense ideally. I don't know who is a bipartisan group. Does a bipartisan group even exist really? But if a bipartisan group were to come in and draw all the state lines so that no one could be accused of gerrymandering, I do think that's an ideal situation. But what we're dealing with now is Texas redraws, so now California wants to redraw, and so we might have this domino effect of everyone redrawing, and kind of just like, where do we even go from here? I don't know if you have opinions about like the bipartisan group being in control or anything about that.
Well, to answer the question, can any state be trusted to draw its own maps fairly? No.
Mm-hmm.
No, just no. Human nature always favors, human nature will always favor who they want to be in power, and the self-interest of any politician. And when you put a group of them in a room, they're all gonna just.
Right.
I just don't think it works. As far as bipartisan goes, how?
Right.
How is that determined?
They're called independent.
Who's independent?
Exactly.
Because all the independents we have or had usually caucus with the Democrats, except for Angus King, who famously led the charge to break the stalemate in the Senate. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's no way of doing getting bipartisan groups. That's why I don't understand why we have congressional districts. Why can't we just vote for this is why I hate the electoral college, for example.
I think this is I think the districts are made to get to
do Congress. So
that's why I'm thinking. Yeah, it's a more democratic way than just the president, where we have like the whole country vote for one person.
Right.
If I live in whatever district in Massachusetts, then I'm voting with however many people who live close to me, and then we vote for a certain candidate. So we're trying to. The House of Representatives is our most democratic form in the federal government. So I think the districts are rather necessary if we want to maintain that democratic republic. But I agree that mitigating these gerrymandering and just redistricting laws is tough, because you can't really come across a truly bipartisan organization. But as we have it now, like I said, like this domino effect, we don't know how that's going to end. Like I said before, we're two high school students who only can give so much input, but this is a very tricky situation where it seems like we're going down a weird, bad domino effect path, but the solution is kind of impractical because it wouldn't really exist at all. If you have more input on that, Ethan.
Doesn't the court have to approve every map drawn?
Yes.
This is why the court was supposed to be independent in the first place.
Right.
So I guess the question isn't, how. Well, the court not being independent right now has a lot of issues. So I guess kill two birds with one stone here. How do you make the court more independent, or bipartisan rather? That's what I think should be more important. Also, for this specific situation, why don't we just, why don't we make it a law to change it after every 10 years? To make it only available to redistrict after 10 years, and have that only be allowed to, start the redistricting process outside of precedent if there is noticeable change in the demographic of a state, because in the grand scheme of things, 10 years, not like a lot will change in 10 years, not as much will change in 5. I guess maybe COVID changed a lot of things, which is a crisis, which makes sense, but generally I think you should have the 10-year rule. I think we should make that a law.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would definitely be a way of mitigating it. I think that would definitely help. But then every 10 years, you're going to have crazy gerrymandering once again.
So how do you turn the court independent?
Right. And, I mean, you're really not going to have anything independent when you have a two-party system. But yeah, the two-party system, it is definitely made from competition. It's made from these American ideals, but then if we don't have anyone who's truly independent, but then again, even with one party system, you're still going to have people who, like you said, human nature, people are always going to look out for themselves. And I do think, I don't know, this is one of the
trickier.
Yeah, definitely trickier topics. And then kind of just like, I feel like closing out this topic about like the gerrymandering and its possible alleged racial discrimination. I mean, I think we can all agree that that's a unconstitutional thing. If it exists, if the court finds that it doesn't exist, then that's something we have to talk about. But I mean, yeah, racial discrimination through gerrymandering is obviously unconstitutional. And how do we mitigate that if we don't have anyone independent? It's all going back to like the same issue of this two-party system, this nobody's independent, everyone's looking out for themselves, and
everything, every time, every presidential election is becoming more and more polarized. Yeah, which is because they're playing on the rhetoric to impact the American people's decision to like who they vote for. So, what happened to civil debate? Like you look back at old presidential debates, right, and you see civility. You see like, oh, we both want the best for this country. But we did disagree on how to get to there. Mm-hmm. That's what you should keep in mind. Just whose plan do you think is better versus now, he's a sexual abuser. She's an idiot who let illegals across the like. It just throwing money against each other, which I thought we would have left this back with. We would drop this with Adams and Jefferson,
right,
or John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. But no, it's persisted and brought back to the current day. Because the government feels so out of touch from the people, so you feel as though you want somebody. So when someone comes along and promises, the sun and stars to, represent your interests, to be the right person for you, to represent you, you believe them. And then if it doesn't happen, then it just, I don't know, it just pisses me off. So
yeah.
I think the solution is just make the courts. How do you make the courts independent? Because everything ends with the court.
Yeah. I feel like we've kind of, again, exhausted this topic because we're not going to get a solution today. But this is definitely a very interesting one. And it does come down to our fundamental system. And I think that it is definitely embedded in how our system functions. And I don't foresee any change that is not drastic or radical without changing like this gerrymandering. And then also becomes a question, is gerrymandering an important enough issue to completely radicalize the entire government? I don't know. If this is truly being based off of race and this is a racial gerrymandering and we have no way of stopping it, then I think at that point it has become such an important issue that we must have some sort of radical reform of the government. But I don't know. I think it's very interesting, and how we go forth with this is unbeknownst to me.
Before we close out, what do you think about California's Prop 50, the California response to the Texas redistricting?
I mean, I personally think it's just adding fuel to the fire because, like I said, that is going to be the domino effect, and then maybe you get another red state that tries to win 5 back. But yeah, you're going to have this domino effect, and I don't blame California for wanting to get some sort of revenge and like equalize it again, but in a way, like I said, they're adding fuel to the fire, and we're just going to make this a bigger issue than it already is. And I don't know if it was their best move. It was
A move.
It was a move, and it was a move that helped California specifically, if you're a Democrat. Ending that gerrymandering and segueing into our third and final topic, the U.S. foreign policy rewritten, the 2025 National Security Strategy. So some context for those of you who do not know, the administration released a new national security strategy, shifting U.S. focus away from Europe and global alliances and towards the Western Hemisphere, border security, and migration. It also included stark language about Europe facing civilizational erasure.
Close enough.
We're going to cut that out. Civilization erasure?
Civilizational erasure.
This is a direct quote. Civilizational erasure.
There's no T. Where'd you get the T from?
And signing a major shift in tone and priorities. So what is national security strategy? So every administration releases a strategy outlining America's biggest threats and priorities. And the new one is dramatically different from past versions. It has some very big key shifts, such as less focus on NATO and Europe, and more focus on Latin America, border issues, drug cartels, and hemispheric security. There is less emphasis on climate change and democracy promotion, and more emphasis on national sovereignty and reducing foreign obligations.
The Democratic and
Wow.
The Democratic and internationalist critique.
It's infecting.
So, according to foreign policy analysts, critical of the strategy, abandoning Europe weakens NATO and emboldens adversaries like Russia. Democrats argue that a strong alliance protects the U.S. and isolation risks instability, and that many warn that the moral leadership defending democracy, human rights, and climate alliances is being replaced by a more transactional approach, which is what he promised to do. He promised to, charge everybody more tariffs, which he did. So concerns.
That was one problem.
At least one. Thank God. So main concerns: U.S. credibility will collapse. Allies are unsure they can rely on America, and climate and global threats are being deprioritized. So, I get his argument, but also, America is the global police, and we've set ourselves up. He can't just abandon the world like that.
Right. Yeah. And then, according to right-leaning analysts, America has overexerted abroad for decades, taking on burdens other wealthy nations should share. Europe has relied too heavily on the U.S. defense spending, and the U.S. cannot forever bankroll NATO. Prioritizing the Western Hemisphere is common sense, they say. Border security, drug trafficking, and migration pressures are more immediate threats than distant conflicts. Conservatives argue the strategy modernizes foreign policy for a multipolar world. I mean, this is just reminding me of the United States in the past, kind of just, around World War times when they were trying to not get involved in these European conflicts and trying to focus on what's ever happening at home, I guess, also focused on the Western Hemisphere. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Is it necessary to be involved in NATO? Is it necessary to be involved in these European alliances? Or should we be more focused on the Western Hemisphere, what's happening here? I can, if you're ready to talk, or I can give my input first if you want. Okay, yeah. I think that naturally focusing on America first makes the most sense, and then kind of extending more broadly from there. And my views, I think that American government should focus on America to begin with, and then we extend from there. So I definitely think that the common sense argument of dealing with our own hemisphere first and then expanding, but I don't know if I agree with completely abandoning Europe and NATO at the same time. And I don't know what the administration's thoughts are on that, if we are thinking of, I don't even know, just like we have not left NATO yet. I don't know if that's something that they're considering, but is the Russia-Ukraine war our business? Is the Middle East our business? Is anything that's happening in Europe our business?
Well, the Middle East is
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Middle East is our business because of oil. Lots and lots and lots of oil. But I digress.
And an ideal government that looks out for its people and not just for oil. Is any of this our business? And also, is the Western Hemisphere even our business if it's not a direct threat? So what is an actual threat to us? Is the Russia-Ukraine war a direct threat to us because Russia is becoming larger and becoming maybe I don't know, like a Soviet Union again? Or is that just not going to happen and we're over-dramatizing what Russia wants to become, what Putin ambitions are? I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's necessary for the United States to be in every European issue, but I do think pulling the rug and leaving immediately would be hard for them to be able to sustain themselves. So I guess we'll see if Trump plans on completely leaving NATO or completely abandoning the Eastern Hemisphere, including Europe. But yeah, do you have thoughts?
So, to me, any reduction in U.S. involvement in foreign affairs is a reduction in U.S. influence. So it becomes kind of a game to see is the influence we get globally worth the resources and money we put into the conflicts and to the altercations between countries. Is that trade-off worth it? Personally, I don't know the extent of how far we go. I do know that the majority of the weapons, at least the military equipment we give to Ukraine, were, I believe, stockpiles of old weaponry that we needed to get rid of because we had new stuff coming in. So it's we might as well take it and let them use it, and let's see how far ahead is our old equipment than Russia. And I think preliminary tests some pretty good results in older systems, where now the space, because the U.S. is always innovating, always has these giant contracts with defense companies to make new weaponry. So as far I don't know the economic aid, how much we gave them in money, like dollars. I don't know the effect of that, but as far as military, I think that giving them our old weapons was a win-win for both sides. Now to talk about just in general, you lose everywhere you pull out of. You lose influence. It's a lot harder to project power into Afghanistan now after we pulled out in 2022. It's a way harder to put influence back in the area. And right now, where the U.S. I mentioned this before in this episode, but the U.S. is the world's police. And if we don't do that, either one, our allies might. There's a small chance that they might collapse, very small. What's more likely is, though, they will increase in their own influence, and when the time comes for the U.S. to trying to get back more influence in the world, they'll say, "Yeah, we're good. We don't need you anymore." And is that something we want as a U.S. to lose global interest? I understand the need to decrease our spending, but at the same time, he's not decreasing spending. He increased spending in the Big Beautiful Bill, and this has been a trend with Republicans in the modern era, where Reagan is as this great conservative. He increased the deficit, he increased the debt, because everything he cut in welfare, he put that and more into the military. So I really don't think that what Trump says he's doing by cutting our ties with allies in foreign affairs is going to achieve what he wants. It's the perception of what it gives, and I don't even think that I think we lose a lot by doing this, personally.
Yeah. I definitely think there is like a aspect of it being a two-sided coin because like you said, the U.S. is known as the world's police, but does that mean that we have to be? Should we be prioritizing that when we've just discussed all these internal issues that we haven't even resolved yet? Should we be prioritizing our own issues before we start saying, let's help Afghanistan, or like, let's fix them? And it's kind of this, I don't know if it's like a colonizer mindset, but like, we're so good.
Imperialist, yeah.
Right, like an imperialist idea that
5 on 8 push.
the U.S. is the best and we can help all these other people because we know so much more. And I mean, I'm not going to argue against the United States being a very great country, but that also doesn't mean that we have to, or it's necessary for us to impose all these different ideas when we have our own internal conflicts and unresolved resolutions that we could be focusing on, and we're choosing to focus on something, on people that no American has ever met, we're focusing on Russia, who is so far and distant from us, or focusing on the Middle East for oil or whatever, and all these non-American issues that the American government likes to get itself involved in. I think that the United States having a strong military is very important for defense, but are we actually being attacked? We're not currently in a war with anyone, so why do we feel the need to mitigate all these different issues? I think, yes, like I said, the military is very important to have a very strong military, but it's specifically for defense, and we are looking to defend ourselves against possible outside powers because, like you said, we want to mitigate their control and assert our influence into certain parts of the world. Yeah, if you have something to say.
I'll liken this situation to insurance, because I think my point on how the more involved we are, the more influence we have in the world is, and if we reduce our involvement, we reduce our influence. That may not be as easy to gain back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like insurance. Like right now, sure, we're at peace, but if there's a World War III, and we lose our bases in Germany, in the UK, in Japan, or Korea, and we lose those bases, we don't have power in those areas anymore. The global infrastructure to respond quickly, and World War III does kick out, like, it's way, way harder. And as far as the domestic side goes, like, no matter what, the spending on the defense budget is going to increase. So maybe if they suggested to decrease the spending on the defense budget, I would be for this. I would say, okay, if you're going to focus on the domestic issues, by all means, go and do it. But what they're doing right now is not that. Like, they don't, like, they say they're going to focus on domestic issues while, giving another $2 trillion to Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin. Mm-hmm. So I just don't see right now, I just don't see it working right now in any other way. But as far as theoretically goes, if we were to decrease our global influence, I would want to see a really, really solid plan for our domestic improvement before we commit to losing global influence.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think what I was saying was, I think you got it right. I think what I was saying was, do we have to be involved in any of these situations as much as we are? Why shouldn't we be more focused on the domestic side? However, that's not what they're doing. I think you got it right about what I said, and I think that if we are to put a lot more money into the domestic side, I think that could be a better use of our time and money for the common good. However, we have so much money on these international affairs. However, that's not what the administration is saying. They are saying we're going to use all the money we have used for European affairs and put them into South America and our own hemisphere. So we are not decreasing this military budget or this international affairs spending, but we are reallocating it to what the current administration deems as a more important and possibly more, I don't even know, just threatening situation where they're very, I'm trying to pick my words right, they are very focused on immigration, and they're very focused on who's coming into the country, and that is a very big threat for the current administration. So they want to put a lot of focus into the Western Hemisphere because you don't have a lot of Bulgarians coming into this country, so they want to focus on migration and how they focus on migration through the Western Hemisphere. But I think in general, maybe we could be focusing more domestically in any international affairs. So, yeah, I think we kind of hit on all that, if you agree. So, kind of summarizing what we have been talking about, I think there's a lot of parallels, and like we're saying, I mean, I feel like we're going to say this every episode, but it's the extent to what the government's allowed to do, what the federal government's allowed to do. And we're also kind of talking about this human nature of everyone is so self-centered, everyone is focused on themselves. And so do we even have a bipartisan anything? Are we truly beyond the party lines, Ethan? That's for us to figure out. We're trying our best. But yeah, kind of just how does the government operate if the people, you can edit that. But yeah, kind of just the extent to what the government's allowed to control, and whether that be healthcare or whether that be how other countries function, or anything that we kind of talked about today. If you
So to close out the episode today, we talked about the future of American healthcare subsidies. What should we do about it? What's the context of the situation? We talked about the representation issues with gerrymandering in Texas and California. And we talked about the new U.S. foreign policy, its pros, its cons, and how we think we should benefit from it. And I think that, back to what Luke was saying, overall, this government should run through the will of the people, but the will of the people is misinformed. Mm-hmm. So I just we might not do the perfect job of this, but hopefully whoever this reaches, they will go out and do their own research, and they will become more informed, and they will inform somebody, and they will inform somebody. So you build this domino effect where every single person you touch and you inform will inform more people about certain issues. So you create a better population overall. So it harkens back to what we talked about in our very first episode with Michael, where we mentioned how the media is so biased. No, not exactly. Yes, they're biased, but there's a little nugget of truth in every single article. So just go and look and go find out. If you disagree with us, go look up your own evidence. Go find evidence to disagree and inform yourself more. Because I guarantee you, whether or not you achieve what you set out to do, by searching more, by reading more, you will become a better voter and a better citizen overall by being more informed. Mm-hmm. And do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, I think you summarized it pretty perfectly. It's just, becoming more involved and understanding the issues better. We're trying to provide all the arguments that we can find, but there's always more research to be done.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 5 of Beyond the Party Lines. My name is Ethan Shea.
My name is Luke Shahid.
And we will see you next time.
You're going to be hearing this in your ears. Wait, do you listen with headphones?
Huh?
Do you listen with headphones when you edit? Dang it. I was hearing that. I haven't even watched our episode yet. I haven't watched our episode yet. Or Jordan said...
Jordan watched it?
Jordan said there were parts of it where it was we're going to cut this out. and then you just didn't cut it out. And then he said he stopped watching.
How far in did he make it before he stopped listening?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to ask Jordan that.
There's a chance I also just didn't upload the right file, but who knows? Alright. Do you want to do what?
I said, what? The audience is now.
Trump wants less emphasis.
You need a mic, big guy.
Trump wants less emphasis.
Would you like the mic?
No, just hold it.
Oh.
I'm tired. Trump wants less emphasis on.
I'm gonna explain the whole thing. All this is cut.
I'm getting a phone call.
And you're getting a phone call.
Hello?
Who's that? I thought it was Michael Wibshot to begin. I know. That's why I said who is that?
I would have put it on speaker. What?
I know. So kind of. Am I allowed to close out the episode? Or?
Yeah.
Or do you want? You can do it.
I can do it.
Sure.
Oh yay!